Scouting, the most important thing you can do as a player. And I lost my scout. How many of you have lost your scout in a game? What's up, everyone? This is Blade55555 presenting to you a video about scouting and the importance of scouting. So, if you've watched any of my streams or you watch any other streams, you'll often hear the importance of scouting from players, and some people, like myself, will be like, yeah, you need to work on your scouting. But what should you be scouting for? That's what this video is going to go over, and also, again, the importance of scouting. As an FYI, I don't care how good of a player you are. You could be Marine Lord, you could be Beastie Cutie. Every player makes mistakes when it comes to scouting, and the reason I'm saying that is because some of the games I'm going to show over the importance of scouting, or lack of scouting, isn't meant to make fun of any player because everyone does it no matter how good you are. So, with that out of the way, let's begin with our very first example. All right, so this is going to be our first example where I'm going to go over scouting and again, why it is very important to do. And I just want to reemphasize again that this isn't meant to make fun of any player because again, everyone does it. So this is a game I actually casted live last Friday, which I might, when was that? That was January 20th. Anyway, we're going to see the player all control here lose this game because of his lack of scouting. And so that's why we're going to kind of show his perspective, and I'm going to showcase again why scouting is very important. So the first thing is, you might be asking, well, Blade, what should I be scouting for? There's various things. In the early game right here, your major focus is going to be sheep and, maybe finding the location of the relics and all that. But once that early stage is over, what should you be looking at? Well, while we kind of zoom around the map with this scout, I'll explain. You should be looking at how many villagers are on gold, how many villagers are on stone, if any. If you don't see any villagers on stone, you know your opponent's not going to town centers. If you see no villagers on gold and stone, then you know your opponent is most likely going to be aggressive here. And so, I just want to point out here, we're at 6 minutes and 38 seconds into the game. And as of this moment, we don't know what our China player is doing. There was a knight that went by, but that knight didn't really see anything because knights don't really have that great vision, especially compared to a scout. So we're going to kind of slow down a little bit here to kind of explain why scouting is very important and also just kind of showcase the examples of not scouting. This scout, as of right now, isn't doing anything. It's in this hidden brush, but it's not verifying what the China player is doing. It's very common, and all players fall into this trap, where if you play against a certain civilization, you will automatically think you know what they're going to do. Against China, what's the most common thing they do? Two-town center Song Dynasty. When you play against French, what's the most common thing they do? They rush you with a knight. If you play against Malians, what's one of the most common builds they do right now? Fast Castle Farimba. Those are things that when you play against a certain civ that you'll just assume that's what they're going to do. But that's how you can lose games. So we're at almost 8 minutes into the game, and we still have no idea what our opponent is doing. We've scouted absolutely nothing for the past couple minutes. Our knights haven't been raiding or doing anything, so we're just kind of blind, right? We went 2 TC. We have 1 archery range, the landmark stable. We have 7 on gold, and we have 19 on food, because it looks like we're just going to do a little bit of light pressure and then go into Castle Age. Again, right now, we're playing in the dark, and there's a reason why, which you'll find out here in a moment, why this is critical in terms of scouting. So we're going to kind of fast forward a little bit here. And by the way, this whole situation, this game could have ended up very differently, by the way, if we scouted. So, as of right now, there's a little attack icon. We just now scouted, whether intentionally or not, that our opponent hasn't mined any stone at all by 9 minutes into the game. We're also about to scout that our opponent's not on gold. Okay. So, if you were to scout this in a game, hopefully you would find out sooner than 9 minutes and 27 seconds, what do you think our opponent is most likely doing? Well, I'll tell you what he's not doing. He's not doing a second town center. He's not going fast castle. He's most likely producing a lot of units. There's a good chance that he's got archery ranges, barracks, or stables, and is preparing for a feudal timing attack. Just off of this information, this is what I would assume. We're seeing some spears. This is not unusual. We're building a tower. and we're still, we're almost towards Castle Age. We have almost 800 food, about 430 gold. And then this happens. You just ran past an army that you didn't know was there. And this is the importance of scouting. Without any information right now, we just discovered at 10 minutes into the game that our opponent is going to do a ram timing attack with a bunch of Zugnus and spears. And we're dead. Because at this point in the game, we can't react fast enough to this. Our opponent already has his army at our doorstep. We did not see it. We got lucky that our knight ran past it when we returned this way. And at this point in the game, there's nothing you can do to hold this attack off. You can try to delay as long as you can, but with only 2 production buildings, almost going to be Castle Age, and no wood, there's no chance you're holding this attack off. Now, how would this have looked if 4 minutes ago, roughly, we scouted this, our scouts going this way. All we need to do is have our scout go here. When you go to double check the stone and the gold, oh, we would have noticed 2 archery ranges and a barracks. This already indicates aggression. Because again, no stone, no gold. And if you only saw 2 on gold, you still know it's aggression because that's not enough to fast castle. And this game would be completely different because instead of trying to save for the Castle Age, you would put more villagers on wood and you would spam out some archery ranges and probably another stable and start spamming out units to try to hold this attack. Instead, due to the not scouting until this, 10 minutes into the game, we're going to lose our second TC. And we're going to go Castle Age because we already saved the resources for it. There's no reason not to. But it's already too late, right? The only reason I'm showcasing this part is just kind of show you the aftermath, to just kind of show what happens in this game. Is while this game does go on for another 11 minutes, this game was over at minute 10 pretty much. And while we got rid of the Rams, just look how few units we have, right? At 14 minutes, just because you may have went Castle Age, but you didn't have the production or the economy because you lost this, plus the food, plus the wood, and then over here. And then we have army over here. And really, there's not really much else to talk about in this game. I kind of went over it. But this is an example of why scouting is very, very important. This game was solely decided by lack of scouting by the French player here. And again, I'm not saying this to rip on him. Everyone does it. But he assumed that his opponent was either going to go 2 TCs or he was going to be doing some sort of economic approach and not aggression. And then that resulted in the defeat of said player. Now, I'm going to kind of go over some other things that you should be scouting over because, again, one thing I want to go over is scouting is important, but you need to know what to look for. And as I said, looking at the gold, the stone, and what your opponent is doing are great examples of scouting and what you should be looking for, right? You see military buildings, your opponent's making military. You see stone, your opponent's going to go second TC, or, if it's really early in the game, maybe it's going to be a tower rush. And so now I'm just going to move on to another recording to kind of just showcase examples of good scouting. All right, and welcome to the second game we're going to be going over. This is actually over the same tournament, and the reason why I'm doing this is pretty much in this one tournament is because this is the Dry Arabia tournament, which makes it a little easier to just kind of, make sure there's no funky stuff going on. Well, I guess not funky. I don't know the way to say it. Either way, this is going to be between Wham and Divine, 2 very high-level players. And so we're just going to kind of go over scouting and, again, just why it's important what to look out for. So in this matchup, and I'm pausing here because we did scout the stone, right? HRE versus English, if you were curious on the matchup or if you didn't notice. What are some things as an HRE player that you need to look out for? 1, is the English player going to be aggressive? 2, is the English player not going to be aggressive? Or 3, are they going to try to do some sort of funky fast castle build? Which I don't know why I'm saying funky, but that's what I'm saying, I guess. That's the phrase of today. Anyway, and the reactions to how you go about these depend on what you scout. So we've scouted a second town center build from Divine. So we know that there's no all-in coming. We know that that Divine's not going to be doing some super aggressive feudal push. He might be, if he want to do, he can maybe make a couple units to be annoying, but you know that there's no reason to overreact and make a ton of units because you know your opponent is going Castle Age, or not Castle Age, making a second town center. So as HRE, you have a couple options on how you want to approach this, right? So we made a tower. This is a good idea no matter what because English, it's very common for them to make a couple longbows to be annoying. This kind of stops that. And that's the only thing you need. Instead of making a stable plus units to stop the early, a little annoying aggression, we're opting the tower route, which is just 100 wood, and that's about it. And then we also, looks like we brought some stone so we can get arrow slits. But we have a couple ways we can go about this, right? So we know our opponent's going 2 town centers. We can go 2 town centers ourselves, or we can go fast castle. I don't advise doing a feudal all in because English will usually hold that no problem. But those are the 2 main things you'll see here. So let's kind of move on. And you're going to notice this scout, how it's always around here. We're looking at the gold. We're seeing if any units are coming out of the council hall. We're verifying that we're still on stone. And then we're going to kind of just patrol our scout / move it. Just keep looking over this area. Why are we doing this? Repeatedly looking to make sure, see if our opponent's going to make any units, and also to see when their second castle, or not castle, their second town center is going to come down. So we scout the second town center, and we're opting to go fast castle, making 1 tower, and that's it because we know there is no threat to us at this point in time. There's nothing Divine can do that could kill or significantly harm us without making a big mistake as the H3 player. So we're going to go Regnant's Cathedral and go fast castle. A very common response. And now we're seeing Divine is, he's adding in farms, which only solidifies our belief that there's no aggression incoming. We're just kind of watching, make sure there's no units, but we're not done scouting. We're going to, go over here, check around, look for relic locations, because you'll notice we have 4 relics, but there's still a relic spot to go over. So, kind of scouting around. Going to grab the relics immediately. We've scouted that there's a longbow, and you're going to notice we're always on this side of the map, verifying what our opponent is doing. And to kind of showcase how this isn't the perfect example of scouting, notice how Wham has not double checked to make sure that Divine isn't making like a 3rd town center. While unusual play for anyone to do, Divine is known for going 3 town center play, but we are not verifying if he is going to go 3 town centers or not. Now, you might argue this isn't as important to know because either way, our result was to go fast castle, get the relics, and that's just kind of how this went. You're going to notice we're going to grab a bunch of relics. We already have 3. We're going to get this 4th one here, and then I'm assuming we'll probably get 5. And we're utilizing the early map control to get that, but that's beside the point. So we're now scouting that our opponent is going Castle Age. So we now know, again, this is just showcasing the example of good scouting. We know our opponent is now going to the Castle Age, which means knights or crossbows can now be a factor once this completes. We also see 15 villagers, which isn't as big of a deal. So you can also take a little poke at it, try to slow it down, but obviously you're not going to stop this with 1 knight and 1 horseman. So, what do we know at this point in the game? We know our opponent just hit Castle Age. We know they're on 3 town centers now, and we are going to have all 5 relics and 3 sacred sites, which is going to be putting the timer on English to have to move out. And then notice how we're always having a scout with our knights. The reason why you want this is so for starters you don't get caught by spears in the dark like hidden fortress, the stealth force. And 2, it allows you to kind of easier see villagers when raiding, also to scout your opponent. Now I do want to go over one thing that I haven't talked about yet, and that is if you do lose your scout, I highly, highly recommend always remaking your scout when it dies. This is something I have been doing a lot more lately in my own play, is I used to be like, and this is, again, most players at this point in time, lose the scout, you go, bummer, that sucks, and then you don't remake the scout. Nowadays, you're going to notice high-level players, especially the really good players, and no, I'm not saying I'm a really good player, because I'm not, but I'm just going over what good players are doing, is they'll lose their scout, and they'll immediately make another one, because this scout, I mean, just look at its vision. You're getting this much vision, so you can see anything sneaky. You'd see if villagers were running off here and all that stuff, and it just allows you to see things that you don't see without a normal scout. So you see we're raiding, whatever, and since we do know that our opponent's on 3 town centers, that is quite a bit of food. We do see a lot of farms already. We can go Imperial safely because English just hit castle, and there's no threat to us at this point in time. And again, you're going to notice we're just noticing the blacksmith. We saw that just finish. We're seeing more stables, so we know our opponent is going knights, and I would assume crossbows, but obviously this could be for more longbows as well. And just again, I just want to emphasize how we've been so on point scouting all these things when a lot of players, especially the lower level you go, they scout their opponents in the early game. You know, they scout, hey, oh, they're going 2 TCs, or hey, they're going fast castle, and then they never scout the opponent again. And another important factor when it comes to scouting is not just seeing attacks coming out, but also to prevent you from disaster. If you scout ahead, let's say we decided we wanted to do this 50 men at arms and try to go all in, but we don't scout what our opponent is doing. And so we go attack, we're blind to the attack, we're running across the map, and oh wait, our opponent has 40 crossbows and 20 men at arms or 10 knights or whatever, and we get completely cleaned up because we didn't expect that to happen. If you scouted, you would have scouted your opponent was making a ton of crossbows, and you could have reacted accordingly. And instead of attacking a fight that you can't take, you would retreat, make the proper counters, whether it's horsemen or mangonels, and then attack, right? Or let's say you're doing a feudal all in, and you're gonna go. So you're making a ton of longbows with English, and then you're adding in 3 spears. You're like, okay, that should be enough, and you attack without scouting, and then you get there and you get surrounded by 15 horsemen and 5 archers. Well, you would have had more spearmen, or you wouldn't have attacked if you noticed your opponent had 15 horsemen and you had 20 longbows and 3 spears. You would never have taken that fight, right? You prefer not to fight that. You would have been like, oh, if you'd scouted that, instead of losing your army, you would have reacted differently by adding in a lot more spears and then attacking. These are just random examples I'm throwing out on why scouting is important, right? And so we're going to see, we know our opponent is going crossbows, knight crossbow, we're in Imperial Age, and we've got a really good economy going. So all we have to do is defend, right? And that's why we have outposts here to defend that sacred site. We see our opponents going heavy on gold. And I just wanted to note, this entire game, Wham has had a scout with his army, always aware of what his opponent's doing. His opponent hits the Imperial Age, but he just attacks and probably wins the game, would be my assumption. But that game was a good example of good scouting. If you scout properly, you can make the appropriate reactions to what your opponent is doing. I'm going to have one more replay to go over, just to showcase good scouting, and then hopefully that'll be enough, and if not, you guys can obviously ask questions. But let's move on to the next one. All right, so for the final game, this one is actually a really good example of good scouting that I actually am very glad I'm going over, because this kind of shows a little bit of everything that I wanted to talk about and how we react to situations. So we're just going to fast forward here. Obviously, the beginning scouting isn't that important. We know what we're doing, right? We're scouting here, getting sheep. He's going to scout opponent, and then he's going to try to harass with men-at-arms. But you're going to notice something very interesting that happens here, and we'll talk about it here in just a second. Okay, so our first pause. What are we scouting for here? We're scouting for gold so we can harass with our men-at-arms. What's one thing we notice here, just from the scouting? The gold is here, here, and here. So we know that the Mongol gold is not safe. But that is not the most important thing we scouted. The most important thing we scouted, or that Valdemar scouted in this game, I don't know why I'm saying we, is this stable. Now, why is this important? Because we now know our opponent went for Dark Age stables, and we have 2 men-at-arms. Now watch what we're going to do here in just a moment. We're going to skip forward. Now we're going to lose 1 because that was inevitable. But look what we do with our second one. We run it back. And our third one, we run it back. So instead of losing 3 men-at-arms to some horsemen, because you can get more than enough horsemen to deal with it as Mongols, we retreat back with both men-at-arms, saving them for another day, which is very, very important. Now, what he could have also done is use his scout to keep track of those horsemen and use that second or third one and sneak up and attack this gold later on. It could have been another good thing to do. Either way, instead of losing these for no reason, we are going to retreat both of them and can use them defensively so that we don't get attacked here. And then what's another thing we're going to do, or Valdemar's going to do? He's going to get a wall here. That way, horsemen can't just sneak up behind here and disrupt his gold economy. Now the horseman player, the Mongol player Sass, has to go this way. And now let's just kind of skip forward here. Our scouting has kind of slacked a little bit, but again, this is very common that every player does. They don't do perfect scouting. But this is not the only example of good scouting we see this game. So we're going to go forward. We're going to scout, blah, blah, blah. What are we going to see? And bam. I did it a little late, but we're going to stay in this perspective. We saw 5 to 6 villagers on gold. What does that tell us? That tells us that the Mongol player, Sass, is going to go fast castle. Again, this is something very important to find out, because if we don't scout that he's got 5 on gold, he could be trading or he could be making a lot of units. We don't know for sure, but we're going to skip forward a little bit more. And we're going to scout something else that's also important. It looks like 6 villagers. We now scouted the deer stones. So what does this also tell us? For those who are unaware, currently in the meta, as of the making of this video, Mongol players almost always open up Silver Tree and make some traders to start the game. But we've scouted this. So we know for a fact our opponent is not going to be trading whatsoever this game, or at least in this part of the game. This is important to know because now we don't have to worry about shutting down trade or harassing trade or anything. All we have to worry about is an attack and fast castle, which we've scouted the mini on gold, so we know our opponent is going to be going fast castle. So what do we do in response? We make some units, and we're going to come out into the middle of the map here. But that, again, there's another good scouting that's about to pop up here that I want you guys to see. So we're going to scout, scout, scout. We see some horsemen, nothing important, but then look what we're about to see here. We see 8 archers. We have 5 longbows and 3 spears. He's got 8 archers, and we know he has at least 4 or 5 horsemen. Now, what is the correct thing you should do in this scenario? Should you A, stay here and attack, or should you run? Well, you're going to find the correct answer right now. You're going to run. Now, you might be thinking, oh, well, he's still going to lose all these. He's not. He's going to lose some of these. Because that's inevitable, unfortunately. It would have been preferable to have this scout that without the army being there. But instead of losing all of these units, we're just going to fast forward to here. You're going to notice he kept all his spearmen alive, and he only lost 2 longbows. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but these small victories where you don't lose your entire army can make a big difference later in the game. Is it going to in this game? No, it does not. I'm just, spoiler alert, it does not. But instead of losing our entire army here and having no military at home, we now have 3 spearmen. So if he tries to do any, horseman raids, we can put our spearmen to protect our villagers. And if he tries to push in with archers, well, we can always make more longbows, but we now have town center protection and, again, some longbows. And that was just a great use of scouting here to not lose your whole army for nothing. And now we're going to do a little bit of a switch here. We're going to switch to Sass's perspective. And we're going to notice a mistake that Sass is doing, right? Is he doesn't actually have a scout with his army. I think he did lose his Khan. And obviously, as Mongols, you're not going to typically make a scout. You're just going to wait for your Khan to respawn. But you're going to notice right here, without scouting appropriately, he does end up taking a bad fight here, because he doesn't see that army coming along. So he loses a lot more units here than he should. Again, is this like game ending or anything? No, but it does kind of show a very important aspect of scouting. Despite that, he probably would have taken an okay fight, but he does lose a lot of his units. And then if we go back to Valdemar, this is the mistake of pushing out too far without, scouting 100%, because now there's knights on the field. But we do get away and all that stuff. Now, those are just I really wanted to showcase those parts of this game because it was a great usage of scouting that I hope you could were good examples. I feel like this video has gone over a few good. So in general, there's not too much else to talk about here in regards to scouting. I feel like I've gone over as much as I can. I'm just going to kind of do a little point-by-point bullets real quick. Things you should look for in the early game. Are villagers on stone? Are villagers on gold? Is your opponent making military production buildings? Is your opponent making farms early, which, typically that's only an English thing and sometimes HRE, just so on and so forth. But that's what you want to be looking for when you scout. You always want to look on villagers on stone, gold, how many units your opponent's producing, because there are builds out there where your opponent could make some military structures, but he only makes a few units instead of a lot. Um, and there's a lot of different matchups, so I can't go over every single thing you can scout over, but those are just things to look at. Hopefully this video helps you out. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to comment on this video. I will respond. If you want to watch me on my Twitch, it's twitch.tv/blade55555. I stream Monday through Friday at about roughly 7 p.m. Mountain Time, or sorry, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for about 3 hours, give or take. And I'm very interactive and like to help. So yeah, nothing else to go over. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.